Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to hold on for just a second here as some more folks join in. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Auto Innovators Get Connected EV Quarterly Report webinar for the first quarter of 2026. I'm Tricia Colley, Senior Director of Research for the Association. Today, I'm going to walk through the latest data from the report, and then we'll transition to a discussion on optimized charging with Corey Bullis, Zach Woogan, and Shauna Ariola. We'll also have time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to drop questions into the chat as we go. All right, let's jump in. As we begin, I want to start with a simple question. After the sharp market adjustment following the expiration of federal purchase incentives, are we beginning to see signs of stabilization? Year-over-year comparisons remain challenging as EV market share is still below first quarter 2025 levels. However, several indicators suggest conditions may be settling into a new equilibrium. ICE market share increased for a second consecutive quarter, but approximately half of states recorded gains in EV market share compared to the fourth quarter of 2025. At the same time, the EV fleet reached 7.5 million vehicles, charging infrastructure continued to expand, and EVs per charging port remained essentially unchanged. Throughout today's presentation, we'll explore whether the market is beginning to move from a period of disruption toward a more stable phase of growth and adoption. EV sales totaled approximately 228,000 vehicles during the first quarter, representing 6.3% of the new light-duty market. That remains well below first quarter 2025 levels and marks the lowest quarterly EV market share since early 2022. However, the quarter-over-quarter picture looks very different from the year-over-year story. EV market share declined only modestly from the fourth quarter, suggesting the sharp post-incentive adjustments we saw in late 2025 may be beginning to moderate. The takeaway isn't that the market has recovered, rather it may be starting to stabilize following a period of significant policy-driven disruption. Looking at the year-over-year comparison, EV market share declined by approximately 3.4 percentage points compared to the first quarter of 2025. Battery electric vehicles accounted for the majority of the decline, while hybrids were the primary beneficiary, gaining nearly 3 percentage points of market share. ICE vehicles also posted a modest gain. This reinforces an important theme we'll see throughout the report. Consumers continue to embrace electrification, but many are currently gravitating towards hybrid technologies as they balance affordability, convenience, and charging considerations. While the year-over-year comparisons remain challenging, the quarter-over-quarter story is much more encouraging. Compared to the fourth quarter of 2025, EV market share increased in 26 states, declined in 23 states, and the District of Columbia, and was essentially unchanged in one state. Importantly, most of those changes were relatively small. Outside of DC, the majority of states moved less than 1 percentage point in either direction. However, DC experienced an unusually high increase in fleet registrations, primarily ICE, and if we looked at only retail, DC's market share would be 14% and only a decline of about 2.3 percentage points, much more in line with everyone else. Several leading EV markets, including California and Washington, posted gains during the quarter, while Idaho recorded the largest increase. It's still too early to call this a recovery, but the data suggests that the sharp declines experienced immediately following the expiration of federal incentives may be moderating. Consumer preferences continue to shape the EV market just as they shape the broader vehicle market. One of the more notable developments this quarter was a decline in overall EV model availability, from 164 models at the end of 2025 to 154 in the first quarter. Much of that decline occurred in passenger cars, which fell from 52 models to 46. At the same time, utility vehicles continued to gain share. Light trucks now account for 86% of all EV sales, the highest share on record, while utility vehicles alone account for 80% of EV sales, also a record high. The takeaway here, even as the market adjusts, demand remains concentrated in the vehicle segments Americans overwhelmingly prefer. Turning to pricing, affordability remains one of the most important factors influencing EV adoption. The average transaction price for a new EV fell to approximately $54,500 in March, down 6% from a year earlier. At the same time, the price gap between EVs and conventional vehicles narrowed to roughly $5,800, the smallest difference we've observed to date. The used EV market also continues to become more competitive. Average used EV prices declined more than 6% year over year, and the premium over comparable ICE vehicles narrowed to just over $1,000. Taken together, these trends suggest affordability continues to improve even as federal purchase incentives are no longer available. This slide highlights one of the most important shifts occurring in the market today. While EV market share has declined from its recent peak, hybrid adoption continues to accelerate. Since 2022, hybrid market share has increased by approximately 13 percentage points and now exceeds battery electric vehicles' share by a wide margin. Consumers appear to be embracing a variety of electrified technologies, with hybrids serving as an attractive option for buyers who want improved fuel economy without changes to refueling habits. In the near term, much of the growth in electrification is occurring through hybrid vehicles. At the same time, it's important not to lose sight of the long-term picture. ICE vehicles accounted for more than 97% of the market in 2016, but through the first quarter of 2026, that share has fallen by nearly 23 percentage points. While EV share has increased modestly over the last 2 quarters, the broader transition towards alternative powertrains remains firmly intact. Most of the market share lost by ICE vehicles has been absorbed by hybrids, followed by battery electric vehicles. So while the pace of change may fluctuate from quarter to quarter, the long-term direction of the market remains clear. While sales tell us what happened this quarter, registrations help us understand the cumulative impact over time. There we go. The number of EVs operating on U.S. roads has now reached 7.5 million vehicles, representing approximately 2.5% of the nation's light-duty fleet. While EV sales have slowed, the fleet itself continues to grow because new vehicle sales are being added to an already substantial installed base. Since the beginning of 2021, the number of EVs in operation has increased more than fourfold. That growing fleet continues to create demand for charging infrastructure and reinforces the importance of planning for long-term adoption, not just quarterly sales fluctuations. Public charging infrastructure has expanded dramatically over the past several years. Since 2018, the number of public charging ports has grown from roughly 33,000 to over 242,000 at the end of the first quarter. Public charging ports increased approximately 2% during the first quarter, while the EV fleet grew about 3%. Perhaps most notably, the ratio of EVs per charging port remained essentially unchanged at 31. The stability is important because it suggests charging deployment and EV adoption are currently moving at roughly the same rate. While continued investment will be needed, the first quarter data indicate that charging infrastructure growth is keeping pace with the expanding EV fleet. This chart highlights an important shift occurring within the charging industry. Tesla remains the nation's largest fast charging provider, but the broader charging ecosystem is expanding rapidly. Tesla accounted for more than half of all new fast charging installations as recently as 2023. By the first quarter of 2026, its share of new installations had fallen to approximately 30%. At the same time, a growing mix of providers now account for more than half of all new deployments. The diversification is important because it increases competition, expands consumer choice, and helps create a more resilient charging network capable of supporting continued growth. Before we talk about today's spotlight, I wanted to highlight one additional resource available on our website. While the Get Connected report focuses on national and state trends, our charging and registration dashboard allows users to explore the data in much greater detail. You can drill down to the county level or create county level groupings, compare urban, suburban, and rural communities, examine charging deployment over time, and evaluate how EV adoption and charging infrastructure are evolving in different parts of the country. The dashboard is updated quarterly alongside the report and is available free on the Auto Innovators website. One theme that emerged repeatedly throughout this quarter's report was the idea that the market is maturing. As the EV fleet grows and charging infrastructure expands, attention is progressively shifting from simply adding more infrastructure to making better use of what already exists. That brings us to today's spotlight on optimized charging and vehicle grid integration. Using existing infrastructure more efficiently. Vehicle grid integration, or VGI, refers to a range of strategies that align EV charging with grid needs, including optimized charging programs, time of use rates, and emerging bidirectional charging technologies. Why does this matter? Because EVs spend approximately 97% of their time parked. That creates tremendous flexibility in when charging occurs. Research suggests optimized charging can lower costs for drivers, reduce strain on the electric grid, defer costly infrastructure upgrades, and improve overall system efficiency. But I'll leave more of that to the experts to weigh in on. I'm going to step out for a bit, but I wanted to remind you that the full report is going to be online in just a moment at autosinnovate.org/getconnected or by scanning the QR code on the screen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey and welcome Zach and Shauna to talk more about VGI opportunities in greater detail.
All right. Thank you, Tricia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be back here today with you all on our latest Get Connected webinar. My name's Corey Bullis. I'm with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. And today, as Tricia said, we're going to be talking about optimized charging. Super wonky stuff, but really important when you think about the implications for the driver and the grid, which we'll get into today. We're fortunate to have with us two rock stars for today's fireside chat, Zach Woogan with Vehicle Grid Integration Council and Shauna Ariola with Excel Energy. I'm really excited about this dynamic because for today's discussion, we're going to be able to pair broader policy expertise with, I would say, practical program implementation expertise. So it really should make for a great dynamic discussion. The final thing I'll say before we get into it, Trish has said this earlier, but just as a reminder, there is a Q&A chat. Please feel free to submit your questions along the way, and we will save some time here at the end of the webinar to get into your questions. So Zach, Shauna, I'd love to get into it. Let's maybe start with introductions, just a little bit about yourself and your organization. Shauna, can we start with you?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Shauna, and I am managing our managed charging programs for Excel Energy. Been with the company for about 6.5 years. Started on our renewables team as a solar intern, and then have been on our clean transportation team for the last few years, getting to work on our rental charger program, to manage charging, to our rebate. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Happy to go next. Happy to be here with you, Corey and Shauna. Nice to be on with folks. My name is Zach Woogan. I'm the Executive Director of the Vehicle Grid Integration Council, or VGIC. We are a national member-based trade association working to unlock the market for the solutions we're here to talk about today. And we work with our members, including the automakers, charging station manufacturers, aggregators, and other providers in the space, as well as some of our utility partners to grow that market. And yeah, Corey, really happy that you mentioned that we're rock stars. I think VGI is nothing if not rock and roll. So I throw my little devil horns, maybe even punk rock. It's pretty cool stuff. Looking forward to getting into it more. Yeah.
Well, welcome you guys. We're really lucky to have you both here today to dive into this stuff. I want to start by level setting the conversation. Tricia touched on it a little bit. I don't want to assume the whole audience here automatically knows what we mean when we say optimized charging. So what is it? How does it work? Zach, can I put you on the spot perhaps to answer that question? And Shauna, you're certainly welcome to chime in as well if you wish.
Sure. Happy to share more background on optimized charging. And, as VGIC, we refer to it as vehicle grid integration. That's sort of the broad umbrella term in optimizing charging, VGI, whatever you want to call it. It refers to modulating the time of when you're charging, maybe the rate of charge or the power draw when you're charging, and maybe even the location of where you're charging. To yield some added benefit to the grid, to customers, drivers, fleet owners, and maybe other goals, sort of societal goals at large, like affordability or maybe environmental goals if necessary or if relevant. And this can be done through different approaches. There's oftentimes a more static or passive approach where you can set a schedule in a vehicle or a charger or other devices to shift that charging time or that charging rate, or a more active sort of approach where you can authorize through a device or through a third party, more active management of charging or discharging potentially. I know that bidirectional charging was raised earlier in the definition as well. And again, this can be done to make charging align with electricity being less expensive. It could be done to align with when we have more renewable energy generation, for example. It could also, in the case of bidirectional charging, be done to provide backup power. So there are different, I'll say, goals that are available for optimized charging, and there are different strategies or different ways to achieve those goals. But it is something that is very much here now. There are a lot of programs, rates, participation options offered by utilities around the country, by, in some cases, wholesale electricity markets, right, whole power markets, and some other administrators of these programs. We need more, and so I think we're here to talk about that today as well. But yeah, looking forward to diving in deeper. Hopefully, Corey, that's helpful background. Anything I missed, definitely add, Corey or Shauna, to the definition.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Zach. Shauna, did he nail it, or would you add anything?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, I guess the only thing I might add a little bit of elaboration to is if there's confusion around like time of use versus optimized charging. Time of use is going to be the rate structure that's approved by the commission, and essentially will be consisting of on-peak and off-peak hours. Your off-peak hours are typically, well, they're at a less expensive kilowatt cost per kilowatt hour versus your on-peak hours. And at least with how Excel handles it, I'm not too sure about other utilities fully, but our optimization programs are not the same as the time of use rate, but they do coincide where it's a factor when customers would be charging to help them charge when rates are lower. But time of use versus optimized charging are different aspects.
Great. I appreciate that, Shauna. That is a super important distinction that I don't want the audience to confuse. So we're really we can talk, compare and contrast, I think, TOU with optimized charging today if the discussion goes in that direction. I really want to stay focused on optimized charging itself, though. And I'm gonna build off of some of Trisha's comments. You saw her slide about the benefits. I want to hear from you guys in your own words what you see as the real benefits are, especially to your point, Zach, if there's like different goals serving different interests when it comes to grid needs, perhaps. But Sean, I actually want to start with you on this one because and I want to actually go back in our time machine if we can. So when Excel was first considering an optimized charging program, whenever that was, were they all in from the beginning? Were the benefits so clear and obvious that they wanted to get into developing a program, or was there perhaps maybe skepticism could be one word, or just we need to do further research and analysis before we start getting into this? We'd just love to get a little bit more of that historical perspective.
Yeah, so the programs, both for our static and dynamic optimization programs, they both started with our demand side management teams. I went through the filings and I saw notes from the 2020 load flexibility filing that was really just noting that, there's a big opportunity when it comes to EVs. Obviously, they're gaining traction, a lot of early adopters, and then just EV sales started to skyrocket. And so with the demand side management team, they have other programs that are similar in the sense of the smart thermostat program, AC rewards. So they've already been looking at devices that they've been able to shift load when these are like smart thermostats or smart AC units that they're able to tap into. So I didn't see any hesitancy with looking at the filings that I saw for demand side management, but it really did kind of follow suit with what the company was already doing with finding ways that they could shift load. And EVs obviously have like a whole new stream of load being added to the grid. So I didn't see any hesitancies there. I might be slightly mistaken, but there wasn't anything that I could find. But from there, the programs have been approved under the TP, which brought them over to my team. Both Optimize Your Charge, which is our passive optimization program, along with our dynamic program, which is Charging Perks. So yeah, over the last 5 years, there's charging perk started as a pilot, is now a full-blown program, and there's just been a lot of potential opportunities, I would say, out there, whether it's benefits for the grid, benefits for the customers, ratepayers. There's a lot of different layers on that, but coming from like the historical side, yeah, didn't see any hesitancies, but I think the company saw it as an opportunity that followed a similar pattern that we had for other devices that we could shift load from.
That's great to hear. And you said exactly what I was about to share, which is sounds like it's just kind of an extension of a muscle you guys have already built in other contexts. This is the natural evolution of that. So you talked about these broader grid benefits. You made references to ratepayer benefits. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? Like what would be, like, let's put it into like real terms for people. What is a ratepayer benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the ratepayer side of things, obviously all of our customers that are Xcel Energy customers, through the rate cases that go on when infrastructure needs to be upgraded, that all plays a direct effect on the consumer as it is incorporated into customer bills. So with EV load coming on, obviously there's the extent that is a new revenue stream for the business. It's electricity consumption that didn't exist beforehand. But with that as well, that means that as a company trying to be proactive in what we're implementing through our programs. If all these customers are getting EVs at the same time, they're all charging at the same time, that means there's going to be a lot of maintenance to the grid that needs to go on, which is obviously incredibly expensive. So being able to see that we can shift customers' load further. We can implement with aggregators different load shapes based upon the feeder level. It not only helps the utility, but it also aids in lowering ratepayer bills when we're able to defer asset maintenance and kind of like divvy up what those costs would be over a long period of time versus, you have all the customers getting EVs at once, they're all charging at once. That's going to have a direct impact to our grid. So yeah, ratepayer benefits, really the program is like a longevity program. It's not just this current TEP, but it's a future forward facing program that has the long-term benefits. But overall, when we're able to defer maintenance to the grid, we're able to keep customer bills lower than if we were having to do all these system upgrades at once because of all the increased load on the grid.
Well, and that's, a pretty timely benefit to be talking about, given that the question of affordability broadly, but especially electricity affordability, is a big question on consumers' minds across the country. So that's encouraging to hear. Zach, I want to pull you into this. Is there other benefits we should be talking about? And one thing I'll add on to this is, Shauna, you expressed this from the lens of the ratepayer. Is there a distinction, Zach, between perhaps a ratepayer benefit and a benefit for drivers or consumers that are just separate from the grid implications? Is that a worthwhile distinction at all? And/or are there other benefits we should be talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question, Corey. Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a building of the bridge from both ends when it comes to value, right? Like the value provided for a service from an EV driver or fleet, it needs to be pegged to that value Shauna was talking about, that deferral, right? Lowering the impact on ratepayers and what that's worth to the system, right? What the cost that you are avoiding. And then from the customer side, there's also a question of sort of a threshold or willingness to pay, or sort of what is going to entice customers to participate and what format that comes in. Is that a one-time payment for enrolling in a program and then ongoing payments for staying in the program? Are those ongoing payments broken out monthly and they're fixed, or are they based on performance, so that in months or years where you respond more to signals from an aggregator like Shauna mentioned, or from the utility, you're earning more? So these questions around not just the value and the amount of the value for customers, but also how it is framed and sort of the art of designing that incentive, or maybe it's through a utility rate and it shows up on your utility bill. Maybe it's some off-bill credit that shows up in some other account, right? These are the details of program design and rate design that end up being really critical for yielding the benefits for both sides, for the customers, so they actually see and feel the benefit, but for the grid side, because if you don't have sufficient benefit or a way to communicate that benefit and have it be realized, you won't get the participation needed and the density of participation needed, especially for those feeder level programs that Sean was mentioning, right? The lower voltage sort of neighborhood and local system of the grid, as opposed to the big bulk system. People might be hearing about costs related to new data centers or sort of big infrastructure upgrades and new gas plants and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a different set of values. They're still relevant here, but the more exciting opportunity to avoid costs is on that lower voltage sort of local system. And yeah, I'll pause there, but a lot to dive in on that. And I think it's a clear evolution, I think, of this topic too, is focusing more on those local benefits rather than the big bulk system benefits.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about these responses is, well, first off, it's a lot to chew on. That even for me, as somebody who's been spending time on this, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. But I think your guys' responses, and you can correct me if I'm missing something or getting something wrong here, it speaks to, when we talk about the versatility of the benefits, it speaks to the versatility of these programs. It's back to your earlier point, Zach, that these programs are highly customizable. And Shauna, we heard you talk about 2 different programs you guys have, and maybe there's more you haven't touched on, but I think that's really awesome to hear that, each utility can be thinking about something different depending on what their needs are. And it sounds like we could be sending benefits in different directions, perhaps, or maybe there's a cascading set of benefits for the utility operator, for the ratepayer, for drivers, for the incentives that they're getting. So I think that's a really awesome takeaway from this discussion. Shauna, something I want to follow up on that you said. You talked about how you've gone from a pilot to a full-blown program, which is music to my ears for the automaker perspective on this. I'll just say we love optimized charging, hence this webinar. And we are really excited to see optimized charging proliferate and get beyond this pilot scale idea. We're seeing this across the country. People are still in a pilot mode. We push for mass market programs. This is where we feel like you're really going to get you're going to really scale benefits on a level that is felt by everyone across the board. I'm wondering, how do we get from pilot to scale, or how do we get from pilots to mass market programs? Any insights on the Excel journey here?
Yeah, it's been fun. It has been a very comprehensive program with a lot of internal teams and external teams involved. So I think when it comes to scalability, definitely automation. We've been able to work with great vendors that have been able to have a lot of automation on their end. But as the utility side, we've been spending the last couple of years in a lot of back-end development to ease the customer process, ease enrollments, incentives, all of that. So yeah, I would say going from pilot to a full-blown program, things were approved to adjust that. So the program for Charging Perks started off as a 600 person pilot, expanded to 1,000 vehicles. Then it's been uncapped, I believe, since 2024, and we've scaled it to a little over, I think, 5,100 customers in the last couple of years. But yeah, I would say primarily with utilities, we do move a little slower than probably a lot of other companies, where working on the internal development and automation that you can incorporate with your vendors is really huge. And then also relying on vendors that have so much technology at their fingertips has been like the greatest thing of being able to scale it. I don't think we would be able to scale it without having vendors that could do what they're doing for our programs.
Got it. So it sounds like a lot of technical capability and workflow processes behind the scenes that
Yeah.
most people can't actually see, but they'll just feel it from their experience, perhaps, in the program. Zach, what are you seeing when it comes from going from pilot to scale? Is there other things to be thinking about here or lessons learned from across the country?
Yeah, absolutely, Corey. I'd say the most important thing that we've seen here is that there's a really strong role for policy to help drive evolution from pilot to mass market offering, and that is drawing back to a core paradigm we have in this country for how utilities are regulated. We have a lot of large investor-owned utilities in the country that receive are sort of incentivized to invest in a lot of physical infrastructure. And when we approach them and say, hey, we have this great solution that will allow you to avoid or defer those infrastructure investments, they might be excited about that, but it might be viewed not just as not core to their business, but maybe even a bit of a threat, if I could say. And so that's where the role of utility regulators, the state level commissions that set the rules of the road for utilities, that's where they come in and they say, hey, actually, this is good for ratepayers, for the my constituents as a commission. And so we want to see more of this at a larger scale. So and that is, this paradigm is no fault of any specific utility. This is not like a cultural challenge where it's X, Y, or Z utility doing something wrong. It just is the way that large utilities are regulated in this country, and it creates an accidental sort of perverse incentive. And that's why the role of policy is really core to moving past the sort of science project stage and into like a real significant scale, where, to your point earlier, Corey, that cost effectiveness can be shown, where the costs are far outweighed by the benefits, because so much of this is based on those vendor partners that Shauna mentioned. A lot of it is software cost, things that are sort of overhead admin that scale really well when you increase participation, where you're getting more benefit from each customer, and there's not much more marginal cost in managing the charging for those customers. So in sum, yes, we need utilities to act, but they're often needing that direction from their regulator, and sometimes even just authorization from their regulator to make these investments and launch these programs at larger scale.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I just want to throw our view into this discussion as well. One of the, let's say, policy items we advocate for to push for scale, and I'm interested in your guys' reactions on this. We like to argue for setting enrollment goals. And it's, by setting an aspirational goal on how many people you enroll over time or in a given year, it's not so much we advocate for that as like some kind of regulatory hammer to hold you accountable to, but it's more like sets the table for a conversation on, okay, that's the target we're trying to hit. We know what we're after. Obviously, there's so many mechanics that go into realizing that goal, but for us, we feel like there's kind of a natural forcing function there, and then being able to benchmark your enrollment year after year to see, are we on target? It also kind of forces a conversation on like what's working, what's not working to get us to our enrollment goals. Curious as to your guys' thoughts on that. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the end all be all on how you get to scale. We think it's just one piece of the puzzle to get there. Zach, get any reactions to that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, targets are really important. Like you said, it sets a watermark, and it lets you know, are you on track for something? Is there a North Star you're working toward, or are you just sort of, messing about with pilots, right? So we definitely support those sorts of enrollment targets, and those too can take different forms. It could be a number of customers, a percent of customers. It could be measured in kilowatts or kilowatt hour, these units of measurement for the electricity system. One thing I will note, you mentioned hammers. We also have some carrots to use. So we actually, some specific examples here in New York State, there are utilities that have had these what are called earnings adjustment mechanisms. So a little bit in the weeds, but basically a way to make it financially in their best interest as a publicly traded company to enroll more customers in their managed charging program. So that's why New York State, and we're working with the partner right now to confirm this, but we're pretty sure has the utilities there have the largest managed charging programs. And it's, I think, no coincidence that they have the largest programs. And they also have this incentive mechanism, this carrot, where it's in their interest to expand participation. So we can make targets non-binding in that way. That is just a North Star, but we can also implement where it's available, and there's some nuance of like policy and legal constructs there. We can also maybe implement some carrots and really drive things forward even faster.
I appreciate that. Good call out to the carrots. Shauna, can I put you on the spot with this as well? Is it, Corey, that's a nice, cute little idea, but that's not really what makes a difference at the end of the day. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, from a program implementation standpoint, we're always looking at enrollment counts. If you look at our last TEP, we had a very ambitious goal of 40,000 customers enrolled by, I think it was 2026. So we're not at that by any means, but it really had us kind of like take a look back to reevaluate with where the market's at. Which partnerships do our vendors have access to that we can increase our program out to once one of our partners gets. So we work with WeaveGrid and ChargeSkate for charging perks, and when they onboard more OEMs through their partnerships, that gives us access to allow those customers to enroll. So yeah, I mean, we're constantly looking at enrollment counts and using that as a metric, whether that's for internal budgeting and forecasting, when we need to know of more marketing campaigns to go out, trying to bring more attention to our programs, along with really highlighting our incentives for our programs for customers to, feel incentivized to participate. So, enrollments definitely are kind of one of the main aspects that we're using as a metric to track where our programs are. But then also over the last few years, there's just been a lot of evaluation to kind of re-level set with how ambitious our second TEP was to what our new filing is going to have in it. So enrollments are always a great metric to use, though. It really lets you know the health of your program, where you're at, and also if you do need to reevaluate and if the market changes.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear. I mean, so it kind of validates then our thinking that we're on the right track here with it's a forcing function for a deeper conversation about how the program's doing. I want to take a pause from the discussion here for a second just to remind folks, if you've got questions, please drop them in the chat. Happy to pivot over to Q&A. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat at the moment, so I'm happy to keep the conversation going with our panelists. There's just so much more to follow up on. So please don't be shy. We can transition any moment. Otherwise, I'll keep things going with you, Zach and Shauna. So one of the things to follow up on here, I mean, the underlying mechanic of hitting your enrollment goals, right, is what are your recruitment strategies as it relates to getting people enrolled in the program?
Yeah, for us,
I think there's.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying, what are the recruitment strategies? What's out there? What's working? What's not working? Would love to hear from you both.
Yeah, for us with Excel, our vendors do a lot of marketing on our behalf. ChargeScape supports Ford and BMW vehicles. WeaveGrid supports Tesla vehicles, ChargePoint chargers, Wallbox, Emporia. So through our vendors, they do a lot of marketing, whether that's in-app features, if it's email campaigns, along with internally with Excel. We do a lot of marketing as well. And then with that, as I mentioned earlier, when we bring on, or when our partners bring on new OEM partnerships, we're able to recruit those customers as well. And just kind of looking at our customer pool that applies for Optimize Your Charge, they can enter in their vehicle make and model, which always lets us have another avenue for recruiting drivers if they might have not been eligible for a program at one point of time. And then as we've been trying to get customers to upgrade from Optimize Your Charge to Charging Perks, we do a lot of upgrade campaigns. So mostly email campaigns, but through our vendors, there's a lot of additional incentives that they're able to provide to customers as well.
Got it. Okay, that's a pretty good spread of angles on recruitment. I guess I'll do a follow-up question here because I'm now seeing some questions in the chat. One of the questions from the audience are vehicle OEMs becoming more open to participating in programs like Excel's Optimize Your Charge program? I guess what are you seeing on that front and with the vendors that you're working with? Is that increasingly happening, or what's the state of play there?
It is increasing. I will say that the vendors that we work with, they spend a lot of time building partnerships and relationships with the OEM. So, I spoke to one vendor and, it was years in the making to get a partnership established. And that's not just because, I'm sure there's a lot of time to build trust with them and to have that be something that they want to implement, but it's a technology. So they need to be able to have their vehicles or chargers support technology like that. So I think there's so much that goes on in the background. It's a slower process for sure, as it requires so much development, but we definitely are seeing a lot more increases of our vendors being able to work with additional OEMs, and that's kind of future pipeline for us. ChargePoint, Wallbox, and Emporia were all really new chargers that we added, I would say, within like the last year and a half. So that opened up a whole pool of new customers that came in, especially ChargePoint. That's probably one of our larger consumers for customers enrolling through their charger. But it just takes time, but it's super encouraging to see the relationships that our vendors are building with other OEMs.
That's great. Zach, what are your thoughts on this, on recruitment strategies and what you feel like is working and not working? Anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, not much more to add. I mean, I'll say, there's, I think, still a lot left to learn on customer recruitment. I'll say, of all the pieces and the moving parts of scaling, not just optimized charging, but also bidirectional charging, the engagement with the customer is probably where, like, collectively as an industry, all the providers, all the utilities, automakers still have the most to learn and figure out. And the only way to do that is just by doing it. Like, we have to get more things launched and at scale. And John, I think you're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways on utilities and working with vendors and getting customers signed up. And so, I think I just want to be upfront. Like, that is an area where we need to be doing, I think, a lot more work and investment. Because for every program like Shauna's, where you see good enrollment and education and outreach, there are programs out there from utilities where it's just like really hard to tell what exactly it is and what they're asking of customers, and it's just not well done. So there's a lot of growth there. And then OEM interest in programs, absolutely hard, yes. Beyond just Excel, I mean, we're seeing that universally around the country, a pretty significant uptick in the amount and diversity of devices eligible to enroll in these programs from vehicle OEMs, but also from charger OEMs, as Shauna mentioned. So can definitely verify that all over the country, yeah.
So I'll offer an automaker view on recruitment and what we think works and doesn't work. And I'll just say, I'm going to be very biased when I say this, but we really think there's a lot of value to using pre-existing automaker channel. So if you are at the dealership buying your car, it's a great time to talk about an optimized charging program, to sign them up right then and there, or at least just hand them educational info about it for them to follow up on. The automakers also have lots of mobile apps, right? If you're getting a ping from them via a mobile app, I have a Ford app, apologies to my other automaker friends, but if I'm getting a notification from my automaker app, I'm taking a look. I want to know what it's telling me and communicating to me, or if I'm even getting an email from my vehicle brand. Same thing. We believe our customers are going to be highly likely to be responsive to those things, open those things, take a look. And I know you guys know this, but just stating it for the audience, it's been, if it's like a vehicle is like the second largest purchase you make in your lifetime. Typically, vehicles are very much an extension of consumers' identities at this point. So I think people are highly responsive to hearing then from their automaker brands because of that relationship. So I really appreciate the discussion on this, you guys. I think we're pretty much at time, but I would maybe give you a channel comments on it, either in response to what I just said or anything else we talked about today, if you'd like. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I can just quickly note that, yeah, well, first off, thank you also for having us, Corey. Yeah, would encourage folks to just lean in more on this topic. It's not going anywhere. It is at times complex and requires check-ins because things are evolving fast. And so would encourage folks to lean in, and especially again on the policy front. I would say specifically if you're looking to launch some sort of solution or product and you're not closely tracking how policy and regulation is evolving, you're probably not setting yourself up for success. So reach out to Corey, reach out to me, reach out to others who are more on the policy side, advocacy side, and ask all your questions. We'll get them answered. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I'm really grateful to have had you guys here today to have this conversation. There's clearly a lot going on in this space, a lot to follow up on and talk about more. So I'm sure we'll be talking again soon at some point. Big thank you to our audience for attending today. As Tricia mentioned, the report should be out right after the webinar if it's not already been posted. So please take a look and feel free to follow up with the Auto Innovators team anytime on any of this. All right. Thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks so much.